So this is probably one of the things I could use help with, but the way I have it set up is this 3 podcast is aiming to shift how you relate to your internal dialogue. From generally people are predisposed to treat it like it's an enemy.
How I would tackle things in a specific order. One. All right, welcome back to another coaching episode of Launch Your Private Podcast. Today we have Evelyn Eliza, self-talk strategist and educator, and she's here to talk about using private podcasts as a lead magnet. So Evelyn, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
This is so exciting. Okay, why don't we kick this off by having you give everyone just a little bit of a background around your business model, kind of what you do, who you serve, maybe your core offer, and then maybe also why you chose to use private podcasts as a lead magnet.
Sure. Okay. So my business model is structured around a proprietary method of restructuring self-talk, and it supports entrepreneurial women specifically because I think we face unique challenges. We also have many opportunities that people don't have available to them as well. But navigating that in a way that is empowered and related to self-leadership became a really salient theme. So that's who is kind of supportive of. And then the way the self-talk synergy system is structured is audio-based because frankly, that works best for me. So Hello Audio is a great fit just in general with my personality and the way I work. I could go on and on about that, but
Thank you.
It's audio-based. And then clients there's associated transcripts and a workbook, reference book, because some people do like a little bit more of that text-based aspect. But so it's self-paced, so people can go through it, but there's a 12-week roadmap set up now. So
nice.
The structure is ideally a client would enroll and assign about an hour and a half a week or 15 minutes a day to listen to the lessons. And then that could get them through it in 6 weeks in terms of being equipped with the strategies, frameworks, tools. And then 6 weeks after that is kind of ongoing application because it's an applied program. It's not, I'll just say, I can't get behind the sitting in your inbox. I want people to be implementing it. It's a course about self-leadership. So we want to be activating that right away. So the praxis aspect is the kind of final pillar that you're going through in 6 weeks to utilize the strategies, apply them to a project personally or professionally. I mean, we're multifaceted people. And then I'm kind of there for support in terms of emailing with extra clarification or this is what's coming up for me. What would you recommend? Things like that. So that's the kind of core offer. And then complementary to that in terms of a lead magnet that goes into it would be I started a private podcast. I can't remember if it's 6 or 5 episodes. I think I expanded it to 6, which kind of leads you through. I can pull up. My memory is so bad. But there's a series that kind of leads you through basic foundational principles that I work with. A lot of people, in my opinion, have a misrepresentation of what self-talk structure is and either take it for granted or treat it in a way that's not necessarily conducive to building a good relationship with that voice. So it kind of reframes from the enemy to an ally that you can utilize in the way you're working, living, leading your life, essentially.
I love it. And I've got a couple questions because this is really important. So a couple things. So thinking about your ideal customer, the person that's going to purchase your core offer, this likely isn't the first product that they've come across. And so, it sounds like in the landscape of folks that talk about self-talk. And I do want to point out, only because we were chatting beforehand, that you have a very unique perspective on this because of your experience. So as a former therapist, as an educator, I think what you bring to this is a fresh and different perspective. And so and based on what you just said, it's very important that you are clearly articulating your approach, which is why you chose the lead magnet content that you did, because it is important to you that you want to articulate to your ideal client or your ideal customer exactly how you approach the work, because it is likely different than what they've probably seen before. Is that hold true to you?
Yeah, for sure. To be totally candid, I haven't done a lot of competition research because from my perspective, anyone who's trying to support someone with self-talk strategies, we're on the same team. So I don't to kind of cross compare, but at the same time, I think the way I entered this space was through a different avenue. I had therapy clients who a positive side effect of our work together was that their self-talk was shifting. That wasn't the objective. It was just a positive outcome. And so the way that kind of piqued my curiosity led me down a path of, very nerdiness, in terms of evolutionary biology and anthropology and basically a cognitive science approach because neuroscience and these things. So it's been a deep dive. And then I had to distill it back down into something I think is actually practical, action-based, but also comprehensive, because a lot of the strategies people are using sometimes work, but often short-term and often don't work at all. And then they're just more frustrated. And, you hear, I know better, but I just can't do better. And I think a lot of people are underestimating the kind of non-conscious contribution that's being made to the way you have internal speech and the sensations associated with it. So there's a complexity to self-talk that I think is not addressed very often. And then it's with that acknowledgement of the complexity that I simplified a model to actually approach it and restructure it. But yeah, I do think some ways of operating are a bit overly simplistic.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And it is important to call out, like, people, the large majority of people doing this work have great intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And so definitely not trying to throw rocks at anyone. And there's still a way that we can differentiate your approach and your methodology and your experience and the work you've done to go way deep into the, cognitive behavior model, and then just be able to distill it down into practical ways that get long-term results. And I think that's a great differentiator. Doesn't mean that we have to, knock anyone else down, but it is really a great way to help people understand through education why your approach may work for them where others may not have worked long-term in the past. Just an awareness.
Something else that's coming to mind too is, for me, like the way I approach self-talk, there are various ways we have internal dialogue, but I'm not someone who focuses on things like body image, for example, which I think is a very important and key aspect of that, but it's not within the scope of what I'm aiming, organizing everything around. So for me, it's utilizing self-talk, your internal dialogue, as a tool for self-leadership and doing that in an empowered way. So there are overlapping features of self-talk that can apply to other things, but it's often in relation to pursuits that we're talking about it with the self-talk synergy system. So endeavors, whether it's personal or professional, but the experiences you are pursuing or not, right? The choices you're making and the discernment and the boundaries, it's, again, there's a lot to it, but there are things I don't touch on, which is also a differentiator probably.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, that helps. Now, let's stop up for a second. Let's just pause on the term self-leadership. And so for your ideal clients, do they understand what that means? When you're using that term, do they understand that?
Yeah, some definitely do.
Okay.
I think some definitely get that. But those that do are often already working in terms of self-leadership, like trying to look for strategies. So that is definitely one demographic. There are also, because with entrepreneurial women, there are people who are emerging in entrepreneurship or aspiring towards entrepreneurship, and then those that are established. And what they're dealing with, everyone's served by self-leadership. But I don't know if that's a term that everyone would utilize in terms of, it just, for me, it's succinct, but knowing, how you want to direct your actions to align with the vision you have for your life and the business you actually want to build, attuning to your own needs and desires as opposed to accommodating everyone else's preferences, like it's a big umbrella, self-leadership. So I don't know. Not everyone would click with that word probably, but some certainly would. Yeah.
Some would. Okay. And they may just be further along in the awareness continuum with it. And so that's just one important part to point out, only because sometimes in our copy, even with a lead magnet, we might need to define it, or we wouldn't necessarily lead with that as the conversation starter, only because a conversation starter would be like no need. So let's get into the details of the lead magnet itself. So let's talk about the hook. Let's talk about the title that we're using for the lead magnet. Let's talk about the big promise of the lead magnet. So kind of if you think about lead magnets, because there's still an offer, right? A free offer is still an offer.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
There's still a currency exchange that happens, right? They're giving you hopefully their primary email address that they're actually looking at. And you're giving them a lot of value in return. So there's this currency exchange that happens.
And they have to give their time, because if to listen to it, they're also assigning their time to it. So
Absolutely. Yes. So with that, what is it that if they listen to and consume the lead magnet, what are some of the I'll use like big promise, but using air quotes here. But like, what are the things that this lead magnet is going to increase or decrease in that person's life or in that person's business? Like, what are we communicating that they're going to get out of it?
Sure. So this is probably one of the things I could use help with, but the way I have it set up is you're changing this free podcast. The Self-Talk Shifts podcast is aiming to shift how you relate to your internal dialogue. From generally, people are predisposed to treat it like it's an enemy. Not everyone, or something to ignore. But very few people see it as a friend, see it as a supportive part of them. So it's to kind of reframe the relationship in a way that it's misunderstood, and you can see that by the end. But there are 3 styles of self-talk that interfere with self-leadership, which, to your point, maybe that should be framed differently. But basically, I don't know how in depth you want me to go about these, but like that's talking about how we're often compelled by the part of self-talk that's pushing us forward in a way that's not necessarily conducive to our well-being or our own vision for success. So pressure is not in and of itself an issue, but when it's misaligned or incongruent, that's the problem. So there's a pressure-based one. A lot of high achievers are dealing with that type of self-talk. And then there's a resistance-based one, which is more based around usually self-doubt, hesitation, resistance, high risk aversion, more awareness around that type of thing. And it can be a combination. So there's combined opposition too, which is basically a mix of the two depending on the context, or literally at the same time, just kind of arguing it out with different factors at play. And then as an alternative to that, you can have supportive self-talk, which will help you direct your actions in a way that supports your well-being and life enrichment in a way that's defined by you, right? It's not kind of prescriptive, idea of success. It's whatever you want to be doing with your life and business. But so there's that is I guess over 2 episodes. And then
Okay. That's good. There's one quick question before we continue with the episodes. When someone finds this, so like for example, I know when we were chatting before the show, before we hit record, you had said you're actually going to be, this lead magnet is going to be part of a bundle.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about all the women that I know you can serve. I know that there are a ton of women that, especially entrepreneurial women, that are dealing with this issue. So it's a very important issue. I'm thinking about that woman who's sitting there and they see this, and I want to feel like what that woman is feeling and what she is perceiving is the problem.
Yeah.
In her own words. So she has a known need. She has a perceived need that she thinks that her inner dialogue is holding her back, or is like there's some words that she's using to describe what she believes is the problem. What do you think is, like, let's brainstorm some of those phrases that your ideal clients might be using to describe what self-talk is, the experience is for them right now.
Okay. So there are a couple different archetypes, because kind of the pressure-based one would be being pushed forward, ending up overwhelmed. They often end up in burnout. So they'll talk about how they've burned out, how they are their own worst critic, that they feel compelled. They often act out of a sense of obligation. So they're just like, this has to be done. Oftentimes in both situations, I mean, entrepreneurial women and perhaps women in general, not to make it gender-based, but we have, various roles and responsibilities where we're the nurturer and we're the carer and we're concerned for a lot of other people. And we're often leaving ourselves possibly completely off the list of priorities, but certainly not at the top. And so there's that. With the resistance-based one, it's more, a lot of times that'll get in the way to the point of it's like they'll talk themselves out of even starting a business. But there's also hesitation with reaching out for opportunities or being visible. They feel like often they're not good enough. Feeling like you're not good enough, both tend to have that potentially, but it's just a different way of operating from that. If we could set that as the basis, like I'm not good enough or I'm not enough, the pressure-based one usually feels like whatever they're going to accomplish or attain or do is going to fill that void. And for the resistance-based one, it's more like, and that means I can't do the thing, like it's just a different way of working around it, basically. The resistance, holding back as an example. Things are too risky. They feel a lot. Both sides feel tension. I don't know if everyone would use that word, but this sense of inner tension where you have this conscious idea of the person you want to be and how you want to live. And then you have the way you actually operate. And it's based on this internal narrative that gets in your way. So it's like, I tend to differentiate it in terms of you can feel like self-talk's getting in your way or supportively guiding you. Because when it's well equipped, your self-talk is a tool to guide you through your life in a way that feels empowered and enriching. It's also survival based. So you have to restructure your narratives and evaluations of like what actually is dangerous, what actually is risky, what's actually rewarding. I'm going to veer into the nerdiness if I go too much further, but like resource allocation is a big part of it. Yeah. So
that makes sense. Okay, perfect. So this is helpful. So I'm thinking this woman is going to see your lead magnet, whether they see it on social media, whether they see it recommended in this bundle, and they're going to know that this is something that they need, right? This is something that they need because they're going to be self-aware enough to know that they've got some patterns, that this is showing up, that they have had, let's say, less than ideal or less than supportive, to use that 3 different types, less than supportive self-talk, right? They may not understand that it's pressure-based or resistance-based, but if you started talking to them by saying like, have you ever had, you have that inner dialogue tell you that you're not good enough and that keeps you back from maybe increased visibility in your business or whatever it is that they're trying to achieve in that endeavor.
Yeah.
I'm guessing they would resonate with that. They just haven't maybe put a label on it, but they've experienced it and they've recognized that they're experiencing it. And it sounds like your person knows that it's a problem. They know they don't enjoy feeling like that.
Yeah. Can I add something also?
Sure.
In terms of ideal clients, like it's often women who are nurturing and caring, like they're very kind and intelligent and talented women, and they are the person others might come to for guidance and empowering perspectives and words of encouragement, which can be extra frustrating because you know how easily you can offer that to others. Sorry, I'm gonna cry. Fuck.
No, it's okay.
And it's difficult for when you can't hear that internally when it's a totally different narrative playing out. So that is particularly frustrating and disheartening when the voice inside you doesn't match what you're able to offer other people. And also you can't hear others' encouragement enough to shift it. It just feels like you're constantly falling short that way. Okay.
Yes. That makes perfect sense to me. That makes perfect sense. Okay. And so that just highlights how important this is, right? That just highlights how much this is needed. So let's talk about the lead magnet itself. And so right now, self-talk shifts is the name of the lead magnet.
Yes.
And I think that's very clear in the sense that they need to have some shifts in their current self-talk. I feel like I'm sure the feedback, the folks that have gone through it have resonated with it. It seems very clear. Any issues that you've seen around the name of the lead magnet itself?
Not so far. I mean, I don't have numbers in terms of how many people have seen it and how many have actually opted in. So maybe that would be a thing. I don't know. I'm not great with metrics in the first place, but also I don't think I have access to that. And the amount of people that have listened it's low, the percentage, like it's maybe 5% or something, which to me is not ideal, obviously. So feedback hopefully will come in a positive way. I think it does capture the point. I am mindful of not over-promising with a lead magnet because it's not going to restructure your self-talk. It's just reframing your relationship to it. But yeah, I think I have had positive feedback. Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah. I see that the title itself feels, and you can use some supporting copy around it as well so that you can make sure that you're really speaking to your ideal client and not like you said, not really dealing with body image or that kind of stuff, and really speaking more to endeavor-based, like, empowering self-talk. So, okay, that said, how I would tackle things in a specific order. One, we have some folks that have opted in. They raised their hand and they said, this is for me. And we just have to increase consumption now. So we've got to really boost that engagement and increase consumption. So with a private podcast, taking them from subscribed or, invited to the private podcast. So we send them their unique link to now they're subscribed. They have clicked on that link. They have loaded it into their favorite app. It is on their phone. It is traveling around with them 24 hours a day. Right? Yeah. That's ultimately where we want to get to. And then we want them to, hit play and actually consume it. And the good thing about private podcasts and the benefit is that you do unlock all of those hours where you're typically not able to reach that person with, I would say, traditional content. But with audio content, when it's in their pocket, it is literally, and they have their phone with them, especially for high achieving and entrepreneurial women, more likely they've got their phone with them all the time.
Yeah, totally.
And so it does open more hours of the day. So just increased possibility for reach. Now we have to figure out, okay, what are those best practices that you can implement to get them to go from invited to subscribed? So there's a couple things that you can do to help move more people into consumption. The first one I would say is on whether it's an email when they opt in, or on a thank you page, depending on kind of how you've got it set up. I know if you're using like the basic opt-in page, I would do this in an email that you send them. And that would be just a video showing them. If you have a Loom, I use Loom. You can use other recording tools like a screen recorder, but sending it to yourself and just recording yourself on your phone, showing them how to get the private podcast. So this is the email you're going to get so that they see it. There's a visual anchor by allowing them to see the podcast cover art. So they're like, oh, I have to look for this image. Got it. This is what I'm looking for. And then just show them how easy it is to say, you're going to click start listening. You're going to be taken to a page. On this page, it's going to show you different, podcast apps. Now, what's going to display on this page for you, and this is usually what the script I use in my video, is going to depend on what's installed on your phone. So if you're on an Apple device or an iOS device, you probably, would pick Apple Podcasts. If you're on an Android device, maybe you would pick Podcast Addict or, Pocket Cast, or you pick your favorite one. And I know it's a little bit more challenging because after Google Podcasts went away, now, YouTube Music is not the same user experience right now. So there's a lot of podcast listeners that don't love listening to podcasts on YouTube Music the way it is right now. We'll see if that shifts or that changes that user experience. But you would just make a recommendation, especially if they're not avid podcast listeners, because that's just a great way for them to not have to think about it and not have to make decisions. Just give them the recommendation. If you're on this type of device, I would use this, or, unless you have your favorite, right? And then use that. And then you could show them, you click on that, it's a one-click load and you're done. And now you've got this. Anytime you want to listen, you just come back right here and press play, and you can continue pick up where you left off. So I think that's the big benefit, is reminding them that it's portable, reminding them that it travels, and that they can pop in their headphones or their AirPods and, go about their day. But when they have those pockets of time, whether they're sitting in the carpool line or they're in between meetings or they're cooking dinner, right? All of those ways that they can consume the content that is, they've already raised their hand and said, yes, I want this because this is what's going to help me.
Yeah, for sure.
So that quick 60-second video could be really helpful. It's just a great visual anchor of this is how easy it is to get. So that's one thing I would recommend. I know that you have nurture emails, so let's talk about those, because there's a couple things that you can do in those nurture emails after they've opted in for the lead magnet that also can encourage consumption. A couple of them are just teasers to the content itself. So you could kind of tease out, and when you're revealing something, or they're discovering something, or they're learning something, whether it's this is what happens when you start speaking to yourself differently, or the real reason you feel pulled in two different directions, or whatever that hook is, you could always refer back to that specific episode where you're talking about that. So I would make sure that your nurture sequence encourages that consumption. Now, here's the thing with the private podcast, because they're unique links, you can't link back to that person's specific app on their phone. We don't know what they loaded it in. I can't get in and say, this is the link to this episode, and it's already loaded on their phone. However, what you can do, if you're noticing that people are not going back to their phones, or maybe they're forgetting about it. I mean, I know entrepreneurial women are very busy, is that you can use shareable links. Now, they're not trackable like unique links are, but you could share a link to that episode so they could listen to it in a web browser or something like that. So that is something you can do, where you can share that link to, it's still a private link. It's not listed in public directories or anything. But if you wanted to just do quick and easy, let's get them consuming it, you could do that if that's something you wanted to do, versus saying, go to your phone and pick up that feed, because you don't know where they put it. You just don't have any idea where they loaded the content. So you could link to that. That's another way we increase consumption as well.
The episodes are all I'm just looking, under 12 minutes.
Great.
So maybe mentioning also just that bite size. You can binge the whole series in under an hour.
Yes.
Even though it's 6 episodes. So that's probably something to point out too, right?
both on the sales page, or I say sales page, but it's a lead magnet. I'm still selling it. It's free, but I'm still have to sell it.
Yeah.
And so I would mention it there, yes, because it needs to feel light. It needs to feel easy. It needs to feel doable. If we think about why people put value on offers, ease and convenience is one of those things that people value. Time to value is also something that people put a price on or a value on. So yes, I would mention that both up front and then also on the back end to remind people that it is light and easy and they can pick it up whenever they have time. Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Absolutely. You could also choose one other tactic, I guess, that we've had people use as Easter eggs. And so you could always kind of entice people to see, you can hide something in an episode and then tease it out in an email sequence to let people know that it's there. That could be a password to unlock a bonus episode, or it could be, maybe another resource, like if you had like a worksheet that goes along, or like a one pager that goes along, like a prompt even, or maybe like a one pager of prompts that they can use, like an exercise, a daily exercise that could be an additional value add. You could have them unlock it or tell them where it is in that episode, but it's just enough to drive people back to it. So maybe something that wasn't advertised on the lead magnet page, but it's a surprise and delight. It's an Easter egg and they can go back and find it. So we're encouraging the consumption that way.
Okay. Do you put that in the episode, or you would just have that in your email and then get them to write you with, do you know what I mean?
So you could do it either way. If you want them to consume the episode content, I put it in the episode itself. And then I would likely put it in the show notes just because it makes it easier for people. If there's a link to go somewhere, you could do that as well. Put it in the show notes.
Okay.
But I would actually
have the link in the actual
put it in
thing.
the episode.
Okay. I was wondering if they write you and say, these are the words I found. What's the link? Yeah. Okay.
And you could do that too. You could absolutely do that. We've had people do that with social selling. So you could tell them there's an Easter egg in episode 3 or whatever that looks like, and say, if you DM me, right now, if I'm not a huge social media person. So the thought of having hundreds of people DM me is kind of like stress induced for me.
Right.
But I know some people love having conversations on, and that's how they actually sell. And so having them write them and allows them to start a lot of conversations, and people who have large teams that use their accounts and things like that. That's one thing. But you could have them just email you and have them say, these are the words, and that you can, set that up so you can unlock or then give them that, whatever that resource is. But that's a way to encourage consumption.
Cool.
Okay, and then I have one more. There's one more way that I forgot that I probably should have started with that I didn't because I jumped right into the other stuff. But it was sending reminders. So in order to get people to listen, sometimes they just need some gentle reminders. So inside the Hello Audio app, you can set up automated reminders and we can send those emails on your behalf. So that's something you can do. I would recommend at least 2 reminders if they're automated. You could also, send your own out of your own email system too. But sometimes it's just a gentle reminder that content is there because, we get busy and that's just sometimes hard to remember. So those are the things I would do. And with your specific situation with the lead magnet, the first problem that we're going to solve is getting people to consume the content. That's step 1. And then once I have what I would consider a statistically significant number of people that are consuming the content, and then I look at conversion numbers. So, there's right now, we don't have a statistically significant number of people that are consuming the content for me to even worry about, someone not purchasing or not. Once we get to, and it kind of depends. It depends on your audience size. It also depends on, did your mom send that to like 15 of her own friends? Like, you never know, right? You just who knows? Yeah. But if, for example, the bundle that you're a part of, so I'm assuming that bundle will reach hundreds, if not thousands of people, depending on the bundle that you're a part of. Yeah. So with that traffic, hopefully we get more and more people that are consuming your content. And then I would say if we're getting to like 25 or 50 people that are consuming the private podcast content and we're not getting conversions, then I need to look at, okay, is it an ideal target market misalignment? Because sometimes it is, because people who came to that bundle may not have been your ideal people, and that's okay. Maybe they were more body image people, or they, whatever that is. The other thing I look at too is, okay, now what am I doing to optimize the content? So a couple of tips, I guess, or once you get to that point, because obviously I want you to focus on getting people to listen to the content first, but sometimes it's just episode titles. So sometimes it's tweaking the titles to make them, to read like subject lines. So we're just making them maybe a little bit punchier or repositioning or choosing different words. For me, my approach is never fear-based or shame-based marketing. It's always either curiosity. I love curiosity-based headlines or curiosity-based podcast episodes where people are like, ooh, what is that? I want to learn more, especially with your audience who tend to be lifelong learners. They do like to be educated. They're just curious by nature. So I think that could work really well. And then the content itself. Now, you've already said that your episodes are under 12 minutes. We've absolutely had private podcasts that with much longer episodes that have converted. Very rarely is the length in and of itself a problem. It's when things are not as short as they could have been, right? That's like, could we tighten things up? I'm not really worried about that here based on what you've shared with me. I would say episode titles would be the first thing I look at. The promotional sequence in addition to the nurture sequence. So there's two different things that are happening. One is kind of the consumption-based nurture sequence because I want them to listen. And then I also want to start talking about the offer. And so there's this timing, especially when you have a bingeable podcast. Now, if you do choose to make this more of a pop-up podcast that has an expiration date, that gets a lot easier for you to sequence because you know that after a certain amount of time that's going to expire. So we're encouraging consumption. And then we start not only just talking about consumption, but about taking the next step and moving forward.
Right.
And with a private podcast, you can get a little bit ninja depending on, what features you have or what features you want. And you can trigger certain messages based off the fact that they've downloaded an episode. So if they did download that episode, their very last episode that says next steps, ultimately where they're going to go from here, or I think yours was a sneak peek of the path to self-talk synergy.
Yep.
So then you know where they're at in the process. If they've downloaded it, you can, follow up with relevant messages from there. I actually like the concept of a pop-up podcast. This is also something, it's a strategy to encourage consumption within a time window. I love bingeable podcasts. I don't love drips all the time, especially for your audience, entrepreneurial women, because you never know when they're going to have that time. So just reward the fact that they have time whenever they have it and allow them to binge that.
Do you have an opinion about this program? The program's drip fed with 1 week of content each week for 6 weeks. Do you think, because otherwise it seems kind of overwhelming for some people, but you could request it. You can request it all together if you want. I can facilitate that.
That's the perfect hybrid. And here's, for programs, lead magnets are a little bit different because they tend to be pretty compact.
Right. Yeah.
Like this is less than an hour. I can get through it pretty quickly. And dripping it feels like throttling someone.
Totally.
Holding them back. But with a program, it almost feels like it's intentional and by design because of the habits and the content that we're working on one at a time. So it does reduce overwhelm. Now, I think you have the best of both worlds by allowing people to request it. If they do happen to have, they're on vacation and that's all they're going to do and they're taking a solo vacation and that's their thing, then that's great. I like the best of both worlds option there. But for something like a bigger program where it's weeks of work, I'm okay with that drip model because it feels more intentional about the focus, not so much about me holding them back from something.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. The pop-up podcast is effective if you do want to go that way.
So is that meaning, I don't know if deadline's the right word, but it's only available for a certain period of time, but it's for each individual. Is that right?
Correct.
After their subscription, they get it for 2 weeks or whatever. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It's like the advanced date-based feed where it's an evergreen, but it's an expiring evergreen feed based on that person's start date. So my start date is today. You might say you have 2 weeks from today to listen to, but Lindsay would opt in tomorrow and her start date would be tomorrow. So it would just be based on everyone's kind of start date. And the cool part about that is that it does give a little bit of built-in urgency to it without feeling fake. We're all kind of on the same page. I think if you listen to this podcast, you're probably a super big fan of fake urgency or scarcity either. But there is something about, especially for our entrepreneurial women and high achievers specifically, we like deadlines. We like we like those things.
Yeah. Even for I'm neurodivergent, there's a little bit of something motivating where it's okay, I have to I would be flexible.
It's a priority.
People it's just okay, this is on my agenda. This needs to be implemented within the next 2 weeks. I personally would benefit from that also. Okay. That's been on my mind. So that's great. to think.
Yeah, it's worth
incorporating.
testing. It's worth testing to say,
Yeah.
I'm curious if it's the urgency or maybe the lack of urgency that is like, oh, I have this. Because, when people buy certain products, and I've been guilty of it as well. Like, I'm like, you know what? Not that I think about it this way when I'm purchasing it, but a lot of times it's like, it almost feels like an insurance policy, or it's like something that I'll get to, but I don't need right now. It's like,
Totally.
oh, I'm going to buy it because it's available now and I'm seeing it now. But I know darn well I don't have time for this. So I'm just going to buy it and get to it later versus like it is something that I want and now I'm going to prioritize it. So yes, that could be a very effective.
I posted on Threads the other day about how that we have this habit of like, we pretend the transaction is what's leading to the satisfaction. We get this, okay, but now it's in my back pocket. It's like, no, it's not, because you don't even know how to implement it or use it or anything.
It's like, that dopamine hit of, well, check done. And you're like, actually, no, that's, and you like, didn't even see, barely started. You hit step one.
Right. Just gave you the doorway to it. Anyway, yeah.
Yes. But it's true. There's millions of consumers that are as well. And so I think a deadline is helpful. The other thing you can do is you could always have it, depending on how many feeds you have in your account, you can have an evergreen version of it.
Yeah.
And if someone really like wanted to, or they could opt in again, like there's a way for them. You don't have to be like, you're never going to get access to this again,
for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to do that, but there's a way for them. You can clear them out. You can delete them. You can then allow them to re-opt in if it wasn't the right time for them or life happened, which we know. I mean, we're all giving each other grace. We understand that too.
Yeah.
But I like that because it does give a little bit more prioritization to it than it otherwise would.
Totally. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's good. And then other things you can look at in your content is just the sequencing of beliefs and addressing underlying fears. So I know this is a lot, but when you get to the point where you're optimizing content and people are consuming your content, but they're still not purchasing. So if that does happen, I always like to think, okay, I'm going to think about my person right before they buy, the person who's most likely to purchase that core program. What do they believe? What do they believe about themselves? What do they believe about me? What do they believe about the program? What do they believe about, right? Whatever it is that their ability, all the things. And then what are those underlying fears that they have to have overcome in order for them to be most likely to purchase? And then I just need to do a gut check to make sure that my content is either addressing those underlying fears or building or shifting the beliefs in the right order in order for them to be most likely to purchase. And so it's that level of, and you do this with your work in terms of digging into this, human psychology and really thinking about what is it that they have to believe about, and then just making sure that your content addresses it. And more often than not, where content tends to go wrong, there's usually a few places, but what I'm seeing most often now of why this kind of content isn't converting is because the content isn't doing enough demonstration and allowing the listener to have the epiphany on their own versus just coming out and saying, it's this, without giving it's buy-in. It's just lack of buy-in to the process. And that's usually like, we're not actually shifting those beliefs. We're just saying, the belief. It's this is what it is. But if you can do more of that, allow them to have that epiphany on their own and allow them to create that belief and truly the buy-in that goes along with it, that's when those conversions tend to be higher.
So with this content, are you talking about within the podcast itself or promotion of the podcast? Okay.
Nope. In the podcast itself. Yeah. Because it is promotional. To be fair, it is. It's a lot of education and awareness, but it's the next step. Yeah.
For sure. Okay. I'm trying to think if I've done that or I don't know. Like one of the things that I've been told many times that I'm getting better at is how helpful analogies are for people rather than just being like, whatever, just going into neuroscience and shit. But so one of the analogies I have, I think it's episode 4, but it's basically talking about the two sides of your inner dialogue and helping people feel like, so a lot of people feel like they've got themselves and then they have this nattering voice that's in the back seat that won't shut up. And it's however you deal with that. You either ignore it or you tell it to be quiet. Some people thank it because they're like, but they think it's exaggerating and there's no tiger here, but so no thanks. Or you just, pepper it with positivity or argue, but it's as if it's in the back seat, right? And you're in charge. So people over-identify with the conscious part of their self-talk. But the part that's popping off in the back seat is actually more like in a dual control car. Do you know with like driving instructing My
Oh,
ex,
yes. My son is
yeah, right,
16.
exactly.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
yes.
So my ex used to be a driving instructor. So depends how they're outfitted, but both sides can have a steering wheel and the brake and the accelerator. And at any point, either side can be more so in control. So you're actually dealing with two drivers that you have to manage, not the backseat nattering on voice. And that's, I think, a helpful shift for people, because if you're not taking responsibility for both sides, which are both you, then
Right.
then that's where a lot of strategies fall short. So that's an example that I'm thinking of, if that makes sense, in
Yeah.
alignment with what
That
you're saying.
helps.
Okay.
It is. It's that shift. And there's a lot of things that I guess are taken into account when we're helping people build these beliefs or shift false beliefs, addressing underlying fears and concerns. And some of it is education and awareness, and story-based, storytelling is always a great way to
Yeah.
get through, whether it's analogy, storytelling, especially for these more, I mean, you've already done an amazing job of taking pretty complex topics and helping to distill them down into practical ways that people can implement to them in their everyday lives. And essentially that's all we're doing here as well, is we're taking those concepts and we're distilling them down so that we can get them immediately without needing a master's degree, right? And so I think that's a big, because you're dealing with very intelligent people. So, they're going to get it. And I want them to be able to get it quickly and easily.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For sure.
without that kind of feeling of like, wait, I don't want them to feel confused, because likely that's going to feed into that inner voice that they're already dealing with.
Yeah. I don't want people, like, one of my friends went through the program and she was like, I've since changed it. But at one point she was like, I don't know if I'm smart enough to go through this. So I was like, okay, that needs to change. Like, that
Yeah,
is
it needs
not
to
the fucking
change.
goal. Yeah. So we've reorganized it since, but she was like kind of an early beta tester. And that's not the point. It is to really simplify. And even in the program, stories, analogies, those are things that facilitate that understanding, because, I mean, it is complex, but yeah, we can break it down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think another thing you could do if you wanted to encourage maybe more consumption. Now, this is up to you, because this is also me being very introverted. I think I would have to think through this a little bit. Yeah, I just am like, oh God. I also love talking to people to get feedback. Like, that's actually exciting for me. And
Yeah.
so whether you do like 15-minute coffee chats, or like where you're going to do a group of, I'm bigger with groups, like let's just do 5 people and let's get on the call for like 20 minutes and I'm curious what you thought of this episode. And I'd love your feedback. Like, and make sure they have to have listened to it. And maybe they fill out an application based on some initial thoughts first, so that that you're kind of pre-screening versus
Right.
just like having one-on-one or group conversations with people.
Yeah.
And just be really clear about the boundaries of like the expectations of the call. But that's a really great way to get this type of feedback that may not show up otherwise, because they probably wouldn't have emailed you. They probably wouldn't have said anything. But if given the opportunity to share their thoughts and knowing that it's really valuable for you, and it could be that you give them a bonus training, or like there's different things that you can incentivize people to do for that.
Like, I have a presentation that I mean, it's changes a bit depending on which summit, but like a summit presentation that I could probably give them that kind of goes through one of the frameworks in a, again, simpler way, but that I think would probably be useful, which would be an example of that as a bonus or whatever. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And even like things that are exercises or prompts, like you probably have, even if you have a sample slice of something that you have in your program that would help them see the value of that, even like a little sliver of what, you're doing, it would be worth getting the feedback that you can help optimize the content for, future listeners as well. To me, that's one of the most invaluable ways to get feedback, is just having direct conversations with people who listen to it.
Okay. Yeah. And probably wait until I have, like you were saying, like 25 people or something, like a few people that are, I don't know, that I can ask.
Yeah. And what you could even use that to encourage consumption for the people who have already opted in for it as well. Like, set a deadline. I mean, obviously we haven't made this one expire. So you might just say, hey, I'm looking for, so if you could listen to this episode, or if you could listen to it's an hour of your time. If you could listen to it over the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be scheduling some calls. So that would be a really nice reminder and incentive to go actually listen to the thing that they raised their hand for as well.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think email would be okay? I mean, my extroversion is coming up.
I understand.
I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that. Also the scheduling part, but yeah, okay. No, I like that.
Yeah. And you could do async voice too. So
yeah, good
like
point.
I'll use
I really like
Voxer or WhatsApp.
Yeah. 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 Okay.
That doesn't freak me out nearly as much as scheduling calls.
No, totally. Yeah. I mean, I could go off on so many things. This is a good example too, though, of like, there are certain things that people can accept about themselves. Like, we don't need to change all the things. We don't need to expand beyond our comfort all the time. There's certain things we can pick and choose. It's like, yeah, I can do it a different way. It's fine. I don't need to stress about
Plenty of
scheduling
ways.
and being engaging. Yeah.
It's my favorite thing.
Yeah, totally. I think one of the things with self-talk too that I think is misunderstood is, or at least certain self-talk strategies, I do think overemphasize pushing yourself past your boundaries. Whereas for me, I'm like, that's not the point. The point is that you are accommodating your preferences. This is about you leading your life in an enriching way, supporting your well-being. Like, that's going to look different for each of us. It's not about unpacking your own personality and like sensitivities or introversion, for example. Like, that's not going to change.
That's not going to change.
Yeah.
Been that way for 47 years.
It's okay. And accepting oneself in that context. Anyway, sorry, that's tangential, but just, it is, good reminder. Okay.
No, it's perfect. This is great. This is so helpful. Hopefully this is helpful at least a little bit in terms of, we're focusing on the engagement piece first. We want people to consume the content first, looking at the numbers, looking at conversion numbers after that, and then even deciding based on the conversion numbers, if we need to optimize, the titles of the episodes, the content itself, like all of those things. But you don't have to do everything at once. We start with getting people to listen. That's the first step.
But in terms of optimizing, it came to mind around like positioning it, like with this summit next month or whatever bundle, I don't know, freebie thing. Do you think it's effective the way it's positioned in terms of opting in the first place, if that makes sense? Because definitely I need people to listen, but there are going to be thousands of people that are exposed to it. It's 1 out of 70. So what would capture the attention and be like, oh yeah, that's what I need?
Yeah, that conversation starter. I think, so do you remember what you had in the supporting copy? So you had self-talk shifts. Because I know on the landing page you had said clarifying the path from inner conflict to congruence, and I don't know if people know what that means.
Interesting. Okay. I've changed my page since then.
Oh, okay, great.
It might not be bigger, but it doesn't say that. So at rewriteyournarrative.com/private-podcast, it's self-talk shifts, private podcast series. It says, for entrepreneurial women, shift how you relate to your inner dialogue so you can appreciate it as an ally during your next pursuit. I don't know. Then it goes on.
The supporting copy is really great here. So no matter how much it's gotten in your way, your self-talk is not your enemy. Mm-hmm. I think this is, and here's the big kicker. Here's the big promise. Learn how to harness your self-talk's power to direct your life and business. It's okay. I got it. In a more empowered way. Like that, to me, that's the big promise of this entire private podcast.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, really, it's the big promise of the whole thing, but that gets you started for sure.
Yes.
You do learn the kind of basics. I love that you just skipped the typo.
I skipped it. I saw it. I can ignore typos. As a person who makes typos, I'm really good at ignoring them.
Yeah.
But I would take that phrase, the learn how to harness phrase, and make sure when you click listen now and it goes to the actual opt-in page, make sure that that's there. Is like right directly
like as the hello on the hello audio copy.
Yes, on the hello audio copy. So I would put that right underneath self-talk shifts is what I would do. Yes, but then otherwise, yes, I think it's positioned very well. Okay, it's very clear. The currency is very clear. That currency exchange is very clear. So yeah, now it's all about getting the people who have already opted in to listen. Mm-hmm. And then what I'd love to do is after the bundle, I'm so excited. I'm hoping it goes super well and that we get to have you back for a case study episode. That would be ideal.
Ideal. Okay. Yeah. Sweet. So would you recommend the pop-up? I keep forgetting what you call it, but the pop-up element for that, like make it, give them 2 weeks and just send them an email and be like, hey, FYI, you've got 2 weeks to listen to this.
I would, if you're going to do a pop-up podcast, I would make sure, that they knew it ahead of time before they opted in.
Yeah. So I'll have to check in with this summit, but in the future, maybe it'll be.
In the future, yes. You can do it in the future.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even if it's when they're coming in and they have all these options, you would still recommend doing maybe it makes even more sense in that case for the incentive to have a deadline.
Yeah, with the summit, it'll probably be different because I think they're probably expecting access and not necessarily just for 2 weeks. So you probably won't be able to do it for that. Yeah. But at some point you could say we're revamping it. And so, we're doing something new and you could take it down. They don't, you haven't promised lifetime access to this. And so when you do the new one, the new revised version or, 2.0, you could absolutely have a pop-up podcast. It's worth testing it. Now, I will say this, part of how, do we need the pop-up podcast? If we can get all 50 people who have already opted in, let's say, to go and consume it, maybe we don't need it. But the pop-up podcast is one with the expiration date and kind of that built-in urgency is one way to really incentivize people to get through it and to consume it. It's just a consumption.
But other strategies might work well too. So,
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
So just something to have in your back pocket to test. But you don't need to have that complexity to start, for sure.
Yeah, well, I love simplicity whenever possible. So it's step by step.
Amen to that.
Yeah, totally.
Amen to that. Awesome. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for joining us and allowing us to talk. We'll definitely put the links to your private podcast in the show notes so everyone can check that out, because I'm guessing we'll definitely have listeners who are interested in checking that out. And we'd love to hear how the bundle goes, and excited to have you back on to talk about those results.
Thank you so much, Nora. It's been wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Very helpful. Thanks.
And there you have it, audio heads. Another episode of Launch Your Private Podcast is in the books. I hope you're leaving today feeling even more ready to amplify your voice and connect with your audience in meaningful ways. The adventure continues in our next episode with even more insights, strategies, and inspiration to help you along your own private podcasting journey. Of course, make sure to check out helloaudio.fm to start your own private podcast. And remember, you've got amazing content that needs to be heard, so let's turn the volume up. Until next time.